Hello there, how's it going? Welcome back to the show. Thanks for clicking on this one. My name is Pat Dan, and today we are here with user fickle-map-9588, who says, any takers, with a little selfie here. I'm enjoying the fit that they're rocking here. I can't exactly tell what's going on. I see a lot of straps. I see a big hood. I see lots of stuff going on. The glasses, I think, really pull it together for me. If it wasn't for the glasses, wouldn't have clicked on it. Also, the mustache is, of course, crucial, but we don't even need to bring that up. I am out here in a sunny Pat Dan's studio in approximately, I don't know, like 90-degree weather. I don't actually know how hot it is right now, so I couldn't say, but it feels pretty hot. So we're on a bit of a time crunch, you might even say, which is probably going to mean that this video goes a little bit longer than usual, because under time crunch, that to me, I hear time crunch and I interpret that as, oh, I can do whatever I want. You know, I don't follow rules. I prefer to go against the grain, much like this guy. So, I mean, I would assume, just based on his appearance, he seems like a real rebel, and, you know, he doesn't take no for an answer. You know, he just seems like a stand-up guy, really, to say the least. So, we're going to try and do our best to depict him in all his glory as best as we can. I do think it would be mighty funny to just have his head be like a big ball. Not a ball, but like a big ovular shape. I think that would add some sense of humor to it, to our illustration, that is. So I'm gonna see if I can't just, you know, do that. And I think that's pretty funny. I think there's some humor in that. That kind of has the ability to salvage whatever else we mess up in here, because we're bound to do some mess ups. So if we just make a big, round, funny hood, I think that's going to make the whole thing just be a little bit more safe, because we have that cushion to fall back on, right? You always want to have a cushion, so if you fall, you know, you're ready to be caught, and you know that there's no danger. It's like when you're, you know, rock climbing in the wild. I don't know. I've seen Magnus do this. I forget his last name. It's like Magnus Mitbo. I forgot the double M. It trips me up every time. Magnus Mitbo. I've seen him do some climbing outdoors, and he has to bring the mats with him, you know, just to catch him in case anything happens. Of course, Magnus will never fall, as we know. Us Magnus fans, we know he'll never fall, but some people are a little worried for his safety, I think. So he has to, you know, include it for those folks out there. Anyway, sorry, I went on a crazy big tangent there. I don't know what happened, really. I kind of lost the plot myself. But how are you guys doing? How's your day? You know, I'm very interested. Don't tell me about the weather, actually. The last thing you should do is tell me about the weather. I'm sick and tired of hearing about the weather. Weather is like, when someone asks about the weather, right? Which never actually happens in real life, in my experience, but usually in films and in, I don't know, books and shows, like in the media, it's portrayed as a very common topic of conversation, which I guess, you know, it is to an extent, but not as much as it's made out to be. But whenever someone asks about the weather in a film or a movie or a book or a show or whatever, it makes me upset. I think it really stems from just an innate hatred for small talk in general. Like, I just hate small talk. And there's nothing about it specifically that I can point to that sticks out as this is the one big thing that makes me hate it. I think it's the small little things that combine to make a small talk stew of sorts that really, you know, it makes it a hateable experience all around. Once you put all the ingredients together, right? And I think that is a good way to describe my perspective on small talk. As of right now, you know, things can change, but right now I'm just like I'm not a huge fan of the small talk. I think, like, specifically the things that are talked about during small talk kind of make it a horrible thing to have to experience. Like, I don't know how the rest of society sees it, right? Like, for me, it's a thing that I kind of have to put up with because I live in the world, right? And in the world, it's a place that people do this activity, small talk. So I kind of have to put up with it in order to exist in this space, right? I don't really know how other people take it. For me, I'm just like, okay, so this guy wants to engage in this meaningless conversation. I'm going to indulge it. Like, I'm not going to be excited to, but I'm going to indulge it because I feel like as a person who exists in the world, like I have to. Um, and so we'll go on to gab about whatever meaningless nonsense. And I think like the person engaging in small talk or the person initiating it never has bad intention, right? I would say probably the opposite. Like they want to have a genuine conversation with you and they don't know where to start. So they're like, oh, here's the easiest way. Like I've been taught that this is an easy opener for conversation and then we'll move on to something different. Often I think you should probably lead with, a more, I don't know. Like obviously this is my advice and other people might not feel the same way, but I prefer it if you came up with a more substantive question for me, like really prime my brain, like hit me with some major philosophy. That's really what I want. Like if someone comes at me hitting me with a majorly philosophical query, just because they're genuinely interested in the inner machinations of the human mind, I would be thrilled. Like I'd be like, hey, this guy is somebody who I actually want to talk to, as opposed to, hey, what about this weather? Like it's not a stimulating topic. I'm not excited by it. I'm not jumping out of bed every day thinking I hope somebody asks me about the weather, because boy, my perspective on it really needs to be heard. Like I want them to ask me something that I have a unique perspective on, at least if it's someone I respect. If it's someone I don't respect, keep asking me about the weather. I don't really care. But when it's someone I respect, it really hurts me to have to engage in small talk. Especially, it's not just the weather that people talk about during small talk that upsets me. It's just like the whole thing of it. Like when people are like, hey, what do you do for work as an opener? That upsets me too. And I don't know why. Like it shouldn't, right? Because like work is a huge part of like your everyday life, right? You go wake up and you go to work and like you go to bed, and that's like the vast majority of your existence. So in theory, right, it makes sense that you'd ask about what somebody does for work. But something about it just kind of irks me still, because I feel like when you answer that question, then you're kind of giving somebody something to base their entire view of you off of right off the bat. Like when someone asks you, hey, what do you do for work? They're not asking because they're interested in what you do for work. Like they're not going to further pry like, oh, I've never heard of that before. Like, what do you do? Maybe they will if it's genuinely an interesting job. But most of the time, I think that they just want a baseline, somewhere to start where they can say, okay, I know that that's a job that exists. Here's what I know about people who do that job. This is what you're probably like, right? They want to stereotype you right off the bat. And, as the person asking the question, again, I don't think that you have any ill intent, right? Like, I understand that this is the easiest way to get to know somebody, right? Just starting off from an easy place where you can kind of cheat a little bit and come up with an idea of what this person might be like, even though you've never talked to them. I think that to me makes sense when you put it like that. But as someone who wants to have like genuine connections with other human beings, as someone with that perspective on life, I'm kind of just like not a huge fan of the whole, what do you do for work question. It strikes me as something that's not very personal, right? In a space that I think should be very personal, right? When you're conversing with another human being, there should be a level of personality injected into your interaction, right? Like I think you should want to get to know people genuinely. And then not only is it just in conversation when this comes up, right? Like just in general, while you're going about the world, people are judging you based on these little tiny parts of yourself that you might not fully identify with, right? Like people are looking at you like, oh, he's the guy who makes MS Paint videos, right? Like that's all I know him for. That's all I care about knowing him for. So I'm not going to question him any further. I'm just going to, go forward, assuming I understand everything about him, and then move on with my life. And that's okay. Like it's okay. Obviously everything I'm saying, I'm not fully critiquing it as like, oh, if you do this, you're a horrible person. Like you're not, right? But you are engaging in some in some social behavior that's been ingrained into our society and might not perhaps be the best way to go about things. I'm just raising questions here. I'm a question asker, not an answerer. And so, all these people out here trying to get the answers out of me, I just have the questions. Somebody's got to have the questions. The answers, they might come from somewhere else that's not me. I couldn't tell you. I don't know how that whole answering process gets going. I just sit here and ponder at my laptop computer screen. It's not, I don't go that deep typically into the process. Okay. But, yeah, I mean, especially the work question is one that I've been thinking about recently. And that's something that has kind of led me to think about like how that impacts how people think about you after you can no longer give them any personal input into that image that they're forming in their mind. Sorry, I just kind of like hit a massive plosive right into the mic. That was not great etiquette on my part. I apologize. And I'm still doing it because now I'm thinking about it and it's making me go crazy with my mouth. But nonetheless, I think like after you are in the grave, like after you're 6 feet under, that same kind of social stigma around work will persist. And then at a certain point after you're gone, like once people are kind of gotten over the grieving process, right? That initial process where they do kind of care about, oh, we're missing this person's character in the world. Like their presence is felt. Their lack of presence is felt, right? After you get over that initial hump, when people think about you for the next, I don't know, like 50 years, I think you're probably lucky if people are thinking about you 50 years after your death. But when people are thinking about you for the next 50 years, they're going to be thinking first, like the first thing that they think about is going to be your profession, right? Like when you read about people, like historical people, the first thing that you hear is, oh, he was a philosopher. Oh, he was an electrician. He was a painter. He was this and that. And for some people that's great because they have genuine passion in what they do, right? Like I think I would like to imagine like Pablo Picasso loves to be called a painter, right? Because he had a passion for what he did and he like clearly enjoyed being a public figure in that way. Or at least I would think so. I'm not sure, but like I think there are people who benefit from that. But then there are other people who I would imagine might not be so excited, right? Like your uncle, the plumber, like when he is, when he's gone and no longer here to tell you how to think about him, what people are going to jump to is, oh, he was a plumber. Your uncle, the plumber. Like that's probably how they'll refer to him. Exactly. They'll be like, oh, didn't you have that uncle, the plumber? And then you just have to go on, referring to him by that nomenclature. Yeah, my uncle, the plumber. Yeah, my uncle, the plumber, And it's like you've lost the soul of the guy. The guy's gone. That's when a man dies, is when he's uncle, the plumber. I mean, it's an interesting thing to think about, right? Like I don't have the answers again, but I do think it's an interesting thing to think about. And like, I don't know. I don't know that much about how people are discussed, like generally in other, groups that I'm not a part of in other cultures. Like I don't know how people are discussed after death, but definitely I feel like what I've seen is very much skewed towards the professional side of things. Like, oh, he did this for work. That's how we're going to remember him because it's easiest. Like it makes sense. But I feel like that's a fear that I live with every day is like being written off as only the things I've done and not the person I am. Which I mean, I know it's kind of, we're getting into the semantics of it all, but I'm also like very, very hot and literally sitting in an oven right now. So like, cut me some slack. My thoughts might be hindered. You kind of know what the deal is at this point. I would imagine, I would hope. But I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. And I was hoping that maybe someone out there could give me some relief from this burden of thought that I bear. I just was maybe looking for something along those lines. And if you can't provide that, that's fine too. I just wanted to let loose. a little bit here. I feel like I think about stuff like that all the time, and I feel like this is a perfect outlet for it, where no one really cares what I say, and they're just here because I'm speaking words, and perhaps, maybe they need something to be playing in the background while they're like doing the dishes or whatever, and they don't actually care what I'm saying. I don't know. Maybe somebody finds some method to the madness out there. I was actually recently engaging in a similar practice myself, media in the background while I'm consuming, or while I'm doing other stuff. Consuming is crazy. I was watching a particular early 2000s film, one that I hadn't heard of this one before. So it struck me because I was like, oh, this is a big name actor who's starring in it. Will Smith was the star of it, and I was like, oh, I haven't heard this one. Maybe it's like a great movie that I haven't been exposed to yet. So I was like, let's give it a shot, and we put it on, and then we'll see our thoughts on it, right? So I was watching this movie. It's called Hitch, starring Will Smith. It's got this. He's got this kind of cool guy persona in it, which I really appreciated. That's the biggest thing that I remember of his performance in it. But I think more than his like performance specifically, I remember like the movie as a whole and the way that it portrayed its main plot line. I thought it was very interesting. Basically, Hitch, starring Will Smith, is a movie about like a matchmaker, right? It was like, what if someone could do the job of coaching guys in dates, like as a career? Like, what if this was a full-time gig? Which I think as a plot, like as having that as your starting point, inherently very flawed in terms of ethics, right? Like you're getting into some immediate ethical questions of like, oh, he's only doing it for guys, and like, how does this, how does this affect the way that they're approaching these dates, and is this like, it seems kind of like a very slippery slope to taking advantage of women, or and it's bad vibes all around, and that's something they address in the movie, but not very well. So it's like throughout the movie, it's kind of like, okay, you're bringing to my attention that this is a potentially bad thing, and you're trying to convince me it's not. But in trying to convince me that it's not a bad thing, you bring it to my attention that it could not be a bad thing, and then I'm like, you know what? It does sound like a pretty bad thing you're doing. Actually, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. And then it's very hard to fall in love with the character of Hitch. I mean, Will Smith does a great job. He's a funny guy. He's a great guy. But it's kind of hard to sympathize for a character when you know that all of everything they do kind of has this weird undertone on it, and it's like in this idealistic world that they're portraying, they make it out to be like, oh, Hitch is this great guy, and he only does it for the sake of love, right? He only coaches people who are genuinely in love, and he doesn't want to hurt anybody, and he's just out here to make people who are meant to fall in love actually fall in love, and make guys a little less self-conscious, or like give them the confidence they need to be able to talk to the woman of their dreams, right? And I think in that idealistic world that's painted, it's great, it's amazing, it that sounds super fun, it's a fun little movie premise, but when you imagine in the context of the real world, it becomes a lot more dicey. And I don't know, I really liked I really liked the way that I saw him characterized in a weird way. Like he was this kind of, I forget what the word for, like pickup artist. Pickup artist is the word I was looking for. He's this kind of like pickup artist-esque figure where he's acting all cool, and he's like, yeah, I know what I'm doing. I've got the tips and tricks, and he's so, sly with his expertise that it's like, it's clearly, he's supposed to be like an idealistic version of the dating man for all the male viewers watching it. And I was kind of imagining what the kind of guy who watches this movie and then applies it to their own life might look like. And it was kind of funny to me. Like, I would love to think that someone watched the movie Hitch starring Will Smith and went out into the world trying to embody the image that he presented as this like cool guy who is so nonchalantly like the perfect match for all women everywhere or whatever, right? Like, I think the writers had to have probably been thinking about it. Like, how do we want people to actually take, like, if people take this as dating advice, this movie as dating advice, which it shouldn't probably, like, no sane person would, but some freaks out there are going to, like, how do we want them to take this? And so I think the approach that they took with it was very interesting because the overall, I think, message was supposed to be like, just be yourself. But that was very unclear for the vast majority of the movie, as Hitch was basically coaching this guy, Kevin James, who was supposed to be this, you know, kind of doofy fish out of water in terms of dating. Like, he doesn't really know what he's doing, but he's in love with this big, famous, like, rich person. I don't know why she's famous or rich. I didn't really catch that part. That wasn't really as clearly communicated as it could have been, I don't think, because I don't remember it. But he's really enthralled by this girl, and he's like, Hitch, I need your help. Can you help me out? And it's this kind of, it's portrayed as this big move he's doing to help this poor guy who needs to meet the love of his life, right? But then you start thinking about it, and you're like, Kevin James, he was working at a bank managing this girl's money, right? And by his account, he only ever talked to her like once or twice. How does he know? Like, how does he know that this is the love of his life? Like, are we serious? Like, are we serious right now? I understand it's a movie. I'm supposed to suspend disbelief a little bit, but you could have lied to me at least and told me that they had spoken a couple times and that they had felt a shared spark of interest or something. But no, you just tell me straight up, yeah, he doesn't actually know who he is at all. But I mean, this has got to work out, right? Like, Hitch is the guy, like, he knows, and sure, but I don't know, it made it a little hard for me to enjoy the plot line itself, because it further pointed out a few of the flaws that were in, you know, Hitch's business practices. And I was like, okay, well, let's maybe not do this until we figure out that he actually, you know, actually would like this. And then he quits his job for her, and it's like this whole thing, which I don't think Hitch told him to quit his job, right? And that's clearly expressed in the movie, obviously, as I think probably to make Hitch look a little better, right? They were like, okay, Hitch can't tell him to quit his job because that would be really bad, and we don't want that. But, you know, what if Kevin James just quits his job because he's so inspired by Hitch's words that he just, like, gets caught up in the moment, and then Hitch is like, oh, well, you shouldn't have done that, but, you know, now that it's been done, it's great. Sorry, I did not intend to talk this at length about the plot of the movie Hitch, but for some reason it really has stuck with me. I actually think, you know, it might be one of my top movies of all time. I don't think that was a joke, but you know, it's not it was at the very least slightly entertaining. So it's not the worst movie I've ever seen, for sure, because there are movies out there that have no entertainment value. So it ranks highly up there with some of the greats. Like, I'd put it up there with, like, I don't know, what's another mid-tier movie? I can't remember any of the other mid-tier movies, so I couldn't name them. But I put it up there with those mid-tier movies, you know? The ones that you're imagining right now, I'm sure they're correct. Yeah, I see you, and I hear you, and I believe you. And thank you for providing your input to the program. So this guy, I feel that he's been heavily ruined in this current depiction. The guy that I'm drawing, that is, and I'm trying to think a little bit about how I can, like, fix this. What is my best course of action? I really think I really think I've done him a disservice in many ways. I'm trying to figure out how I can remedy it, and I don't see a clear way forward. And we are like just about at our limit. So maybe this is a case of move on with our lives kind of thing, and then we go from there, you know? Like I don't know if this is a thing that can be fixed, and I think it might just have to go, you know, the way it's going, which is I don't know, somewhere, probably, hopefully, or maybe nowhere. I don't know. I do not know. I've also I've been noticing something about myself in terms of movies recently. I've been watching a couple flicks, a couple little movies. All the movie watching I've been doing has been like not very engaged, you know, the way I usually consume media, like while doing something else. And so in that context, I've realized like the best movie is like a road trip movie, like a movie where they're on the road crossing America, you know, like that. For some, like I've never understood it when people say like, oh, I love a good road trip movie. Like I've heard people, I don't know, actually know if I've heard people say that, but I feel like that's something I've heard people say. And whenever I've heard someone say something akin to that, I'm like, okay, that's weird. Like first of all, the fact that road trip movies are so common that you can say something like that and not be looked at like a complete idiot is kind of absurd, right? Like how is it so frequent that writers are like, oh, you know what we got to do? You know what would make this film great? What if they just went, you know, from one side of the country to the other side and we got to film in a bunch of different crazy locations? Wouldn't that be fun? And then everyone's like, yeah, you know what? I think actually you're right. You know, as crazy as it sounds, it might be genius. Let's do it, in fact. And then they go out and do the thing. I mean, I think that's interesting that that's happened so many times. But I think when you have a certain budget that is such that you can fund a movie going, you know, to all these different places in the country, like people want to see, you know, people want to see spectacle. People want to see the landmarks that they know and love. So I understand why it attracts viewership. And one of these such movies that I watched recently, I've been watching everything on Netflix, by the way, that I watched recently that I didn't realize was a road trip movie even when I saw it as a kid, was the Percy Jackson movie. I forget the title of it. Percy Jackson, The Lightning Thief. I think it's The Lightning Thief. Yes. And I didn't even like as a kid, I didn't realize what really was happening because I wasn't super paying attention to the movie. I just remember like Medusa was in it and like Percy Jackson was, you know, obviously the son of Poseidon. That much got across to me. And you know, like he and his friends were going out and having fun. That's pretty much all I cared about. But watching it back, I realized that it was like really not super like well plotted out. Like it was just kind of an excuse for them to go on location at all these different places and film some stuff and be like, hey, look at this, we're in Vegas. Yeah, isn't that cool, kids? And then they move on to the next spot. They're like, hey, look at this cool landmark. And then we move on to the next spot. And it seemed to compensate for a lack of plot or a lack of understanding of what they wanted to do with the film, by just being like, okay, here's all this other stuff. Look at this. Ignore everything else. Look at this. And then that's supposed to fulfill you, I guess. Which it did as a child. Yeah, for sure it did. But in my rewatch, I didn't so much appreciate it. I mean, I think there's some value to a little road trip movie, but I don't know. Like if I was to make a movie, right? To be fair, if I was to make a movie, it would probably be a road trip movie. Like just because for me, that would be really fun to film. And like, it's not, you don't necessarily need a whole lot of plot. There's kind of some baked in fun that goes along with a road trip. And you can kind of let the landscape speak for themselves. Like, oh, some fun stuff happened while we were here in like Milwaukee or whatever. Like, you know, and then the audience just like watches and doesn't have anything to say one way or the other because they're like, okay, this was kind of horrible. But you know, all road trip movies are. So we knew what we were doing when we walked into the theater. Like we had an idea of what we were in for. So I mean, it's an all win scenario. To be honest with you, I'm just kind of a hater. Like, didn't the Impractical Jokers? I'm pretty sure the Impractical Jokers did a road trip movie, and I remember watching that, and I was like, okay, this is okay. Like I'm not upset at it. Like, I mean, actually, I kind of was upset at it because the pranks in it were pretty horrible compared to the normal show. But whatever. I didn't intend for this to be such a movie focused. Maybe I turned this series into like a review series where I just give my thoughts on things when I have nothing to talk about. That is a possibility. Could potentially happen. You never know. Anything can happen in the world of Pat Dan. All right. Well, I hope you've enjoyed our little chat. If you did, feel free to drop a like and share any thoughts you may have in the comments down below. In any case, that's all I got for you today. Thank you so very much for your time. I've been Pat Dan. You've been great. Until next time, kick rocks, pal. Bye-bye.